We are back in the Mage Knight board game, and we are about to commence with the final round of our solo conquest playthrough, which means we are in night 3, and we are looking to claim a victory by conquering that second level 8 city, and we are in very good shape to do so. We've got already 4 gold units in tow. We've got max level at this point. We've got a bunch of crystals in our inventory, and we have a nice strong deck. The dummy player might be a little bit unpredictable, but even if he's at his worst, his least well behaved, I'm not expecting giant problems from him, because worst case scenario, I think we're close enough to just make a beeline for that city and kick its butt. We're at 105 fame already, which is real good, because that final scoring is going to make that soar pretty high if we're able to pull off this last city conquest, and I don't see why we couldn't. Last time out, before leaving, we rolled the dice from the source. We got a black in there already. That's going to be a big help. And the big thing, the elephant in the room, is we're right next to the red city, and in that city, waiting for us to recruit them, are the ultimages and a catapult, which is very handy to have when assaulting a city. So that is the initial thought coming in, but of course we'll have to take a look at what our hand gives us. But I am cautiously optimistic that before we hit that final city, we'll have our hands on dem mages. And we've got a couple of ways to get black mana in our deck, and we've got a skill, mana overload, that's going to give us black mana as well. So if we do get those mages, we're going to be in pretty good shape for doing some serious damage on that city when we get there. So along the way, we're going to looking for targets of opportunity, ways to improve our final score. Maybe there's a monastery to burn down, a dungeon to go into, something like that. I don't remember exactly everything that's on all of those tiles. We'll have to see when we flop it. But once we figure out what cards we've got to play with, we're going to take a look at the tactic. Although going into the tactics, I think we have a pretty good sense already of what it is that we want to be grabbing there. So without further ado, let's take a look at the situation on the map here. We are next to the red city, which we have conquered and of which we are the leader. So that means we add 2 to our hand size. Our hand size at level 10 is 7. So we start drawing 9 cards into our hand. And away we go. Get rid of that guy, and we are looking at a very interesting flop. We've got expose in hand already. I'm anticipating we might want to hold on to that for the final assault. But very, very interesting indeed, because we've got 3 influence cards, 4 if you count stat resolve. Not a lot of combat, not a lot of movement, and of course call to arms, call to glory, with a black die in the source, and not a lot of fear about using it, given that we have mana overload. So that gives us some real options. That's very interesting, because with the option of playing Call to Glory, we might not need to go into this city. But then again, I've got a lot of influence and not a lot else to do with my turn. So I'm thinking I probably will go into that city and get the catapults as well. Most likely. I think I'd rather have catapults than heroes for that final assault. And I can use the heroes to get the catapults, so that I can kind of get a benefit from them before they go away. So that's my initial thought. before we do anything, we've got to take a look at our tactics options here. And the options are sparing power or from the dusk. Now, the only thing that from the dusk gives you is going first, which of course is an extra turn, which is always great, even if all you do with it is end earlier and maybe get a couple of points in the final round scoring because the dummy hasn't finished. But I am pretty much going to be guaranteeing you that I'm going to take sparing power at this point, because what that allows me to do is store a couple, 2 or 3 cards before I ever get to that final city. And that's another reason I can kind of take a little bit of time here and spend a turn here. It's another turn before I start exploring tiles where I'm banking a card for grabbing before a final assault. And the way this works is once before the start of each of your turns you must choose, and this is, so it's right as you're starting but before you do anything else basically. You have to choose whether to put the top of your deed deck face down on or under this card, and then the other option is to flip this card face down and take all the deed cards under it into your hand. The point of flipping it face down means you can't use it anymore. It's not made explicit by the card, but that's the idea there. So essentially you can store a bunch of cards in there and then claim them to make a big hand at the end of your round, which is a very, very nice thing to be able to do, especially in conjunction with motivation. But you do have to spend a couple of rounds throwing cards in there. You don't have any idea what they're going to be. And you do have to make that decision before you do anything else in the round. Obviously, we're not going to use it now because there's nothing there to use. So we're going to take the top card off the deck here and we're going to store it with sparing power. I'm just going to put it on top so it's easier for me. And because we are taking sparing power, that means the dummy, of course, is taking from the dusk. And what that means is the dummy is going to be going first. So the first thing we really want to do is come over here and flop the dummy's cards. Oops, I don't want to pick up the whole deck. He's got a green, and a white, and a red. So he is flopping only 4 cards. That, of course, is the lowest options. If you assume a 1 in 3, a 1 in 4 chance of any color coming up, it's still approximately in that area. About 50% of the time he's going to flop only 4 cards. Another quarter he'll flop only 5 cards. And then a quarter of the time he's going to flop 7. He's got 17 left in his hand. So given that, and given that he only flopped 4, he is guaranteed now to be spending at least 3 more turns flopping cards. And I get to go now, and then he declares after that. So that means I'm going to get at least 5 turns this round, which is all kinds of goodness. And yeah, as I said, I think that the thing I want to do is most likely dive in and get those mages. And I think I'll grab the catapults as well. So why don't we go ahead and, given that good start, that nice auspicious beginning with the dummy, let's take a look at this. So what I want to do for starters here is actually execute this movement from the ruin into the city. That's going to require 2 points of movement. Double time is not going to do it for me because it is nighttime and that produces only 1. Now if for some reason I wanted to save march, I could play something sideways, like possibly threaten or something like that. But I don't think I do, because nothing in here is something that I anticipate desperately wanting to throw away. I'm anticipating using a whole bunch of cards in that assault, so I'm probably going to burn through this deck real quick, and I am not eager to be throwing away cards if I want to maximize on my score. And this is definitely using this card for what its intended purpose is, so let's go ahead and do that. Now the question is, how are we going to recruit? The units that we're talking about here are the Alta Mages, who, and again, neither of these have that exclamation point, meaning I can use Call to Glory in order to get them. So obviously the plan is to use Call to Glory on the Ultimate Mages. And I'm thinking I will grab the catapults, because again, I'd rather have them than the heroes when it comes time to assaulting cities. And the heroes can actually, if I use the heroes before I replace them, then I can use them for not only influence but a reputation bump, which is something that I do care about, because if the final city, for instance, is blue, then maybe my last turn after I conquer it is, depending on what happened before that, maybe my best play is to just buy a bunch of spells. Get as many victory points as I can in the end game. So it's not like I don't care about reputation, and I certainly have influence to burn, and I guess catapults would be at least as good to have as heroes going forward, although bearing in mind that their main benefit is the fact that they are a ranged attack unit, whereas a siege attack unit, of course, and the whole point of getting the mages is potentially turning everything into siege. But one never knows. The heroes, they do have attacker block 5, but the catapults are very generally useful, and I don't know what I'm facing before I even get to that city, so it might be handy to have them. And again, I don't see a good way to use these influence cards. I certainly don't want to hang on to them and just have them as part of my city assault, although they would be useful with stout resolve potentially, but turning them into 2 points of attack isn't like a spectacular use of them. So I think this is going to be my play. Might be that it's not the best play, but I think it will not be cripplingly bad either. I like having catapults, so that's what I'm going to do. So I've moved into the city. Once I'm in the city, I'm going to activate the heroes. That gives me 5 influence to combine with the 1 that I get from my reputation. And then I can play Promise and Threaten, neither of them needing a crystal or a die, and that's another 4, so that gives me 10 influence. And that suffices to recruit these catapults, and I will use them to replace my red capes. I will then play Call to Glory using white mana crystal and this black die from the source, knowing that I have mana overload, so I'm not super worried about it not being there going forward. I also have Ruby Ring, the gem pouch, and mana draw as routes to black mana going forward, assuming I don't even roll black mana again with the dice that I'm using from the source. So that is going to give me recruiting unit for free, and with that I'm going to grab these super chunky mages here. I'll go ahead and just cover up the heroes and make sure and grab my reputation bump. That puts me into +2 territory, and that right there would be my turn. I am hanging on to Intimidate, but one of the reasons I picked this was it's not just an influence card, it's also an attack card. Potentially attack 7. Now it does hurt my rep, and for the same reason I do care about my rep potentially, it's still a nice option to have. Because towards the end of the game, if I do have something else to do with my last turn, at that point, once I know that, then I don't give a crap at all about my reputation. So I'm massaging it now just in case, but it's very possible that my reputation means nothing to me at this point, because I'm certainly not looking at replacing any units. Unless they're wounded, and again, units are part of the end scoring as well. So that is the end of that turn, and we can go ahead and clear up. We can throw that die up there, get rid of this guy. Let's gather those cards here, get them out of the way. And we are going to be drawing up to 9 once again because we're now in the city, and our hand size is still 7. So we're going to be drawing up to 9 once again. And as a result, we're getting instinct, mana storm, and our gem pouch. So I'm liking that already. We definitely have 2 sources of black mana for that city assault coming up, although we'll have to hang on to, potentially expose going forward. And we get a movement card, which is important because coming up here we have to move onto that tile and reveal it. Alright, that is our first turn. Let's go over and see what the dummy has to say for himself. Alright, well, let's see what you got to say for yourself. That is a blue, and another blue, and another red. Okay. We're off to a pretty nice start with the dummy here. He's cooperating pretty well. Those are the 2 of the best flops we could have hoped for, and I think there were a couple of greens in there, so we're in pretty good shape. He's down to 13, which he could still potentially get rid of in 2 more turns. So no real additional news there at this point. So that's awesome, but again, we're not too worried about time. I think we're in pretty good shape. Popping back up here to the map, our plan right now is, because we're in the city, for the reasons I mentioned last time out, I think I want to move on to the hill. Now, the nighttime, both of these 2 bits of terrain have the same movement cost. And moving on to the crystal mine would matter if I needed red crystals, but I don't. So the real factor here is really that I'd rather be approaching a city tile, especially the remaining city tiles, from the left-hand side rather than the right, just knowing what those tiles are like the way that I do. So what I want to do, if possible, is move onto that hill and flop that and see what is coming. Now, in order to do that, actually before I play my turn, what I need to do is add a card from the top of my deck to Sparing Power as well before I do anything, because I'm not using it today. All right. Okay, well, I've got some options. I've got stamina here, and I do have both Stout Resolve and Instinct that can be used for movement. I was kind of hoping I would get more movement, but I do have double time to help out as well. And I actually didn't check what the die came out green. Okay. Well, I've got 2 blue dice in the source, and I don't wind up using blue. I do have the ice golems here, but I got 2 crystals and I got a token for motivation. And I have cold swordsmanship for battling fire people. I'm mentioning this because with 2 dice in the source, I'm not too worried about using up a blue die from the source. So if I'm going to use a die, I think I'd rather keep a green than 2 blues. So I might as well use this blue die here right now. I don't think I want to use Mana Storm just yet to grab any crystals or anything like that. I might want to hang on to that until I have a little bit more information. And using this blue die doesn't change any of my options as far as that play goes anyway. So that gives me 4 movement, and I will toggle double time for another 1, giving me a total of 5, which is significant because it's 3 to move on to the hill, and then it's another 2 to reveal this final tile, which is the White City. And what that means is we are looking at, as level 8, the second city that you turn over in solo conquest vanilla is a level 8 city, and that means we are facing a gray and 3 white units. And their benefit is they all have their armor increased by 1. Now white units tend to be some of the tougher to kill, with a lot of like resistances and high armor anyway, so the white city usually doesn't inflict as much damage to you as the other cities, but it does make it hard to kill in one shot. And especially with my somewhat defensive unit draw here. That's not great, but it's not like these guys can't do some damage. And the Alta Mages, again, are going to help me out a lot. Knowing the types of units that are in the white offer, mass expose is looking pretty important as well. So I'm going to want to make sure I keep resources for both of those. But another thing about this is there is a keep right next to me. And there is a dragon, and because it's a rampager, I know what type of dragon that is. And it's a nasty one. Okay. So they're tough to kill in a fight, being physically resistant and arcane immune. They're also, so like Whirlwind, for instance, I couldn't use on him, so I have to reckon with 2 brown attacks, which could be 2 werewolves. Okay, so just surveying this and kind of strategizing. Obviously, my first thing I want to do, probably this turn, is take that keep. Then I'm going to have, if I'm going to take everything in order to maximize my score. Notice he's on water. So it's really not possible for me to go after this site, and I'm certainly not backtracking here. So looking at endgame scoring, I am trying to clear all 4 of these if possible. Once you conquer the final city, the game is technically sort of over, but you get 1 more turn after that. So if I do take all of these, it would have to be hit the keep, hit the spawning ground. Remember that if I'm on the spawning ground, I'm still getting the benefit of those giant keep hand sizes. And then I hit the city, and then with my final turn, I can try to take out that dragon. That seems like the most likely play. But once I take this keep, now I can't reveal that guy, it's night, so I have to dive in not knowing what's in there, but I'm presuming I'm going to be able to take that out. With my units, if nothing else. He's doomed. Maybe that's where I use my catapults. But once I'm on there, I'm going to know what's in the city. Because night or day, you know what's in the city when you're adjacent. So at that point, I will be able to have a pretty good idea. Now, I won't know until I do it what my cards are from something like motivation and sparing power. But I know going in, like if whatever I'm doing this turn, I'm going to take this keep, right? And I'm on the keep, and I have my starting hand is going to be 11 at that point, because I will have owned 4 keeps at that point. And then I will be adding 2 from motivation, and at that point 2 from sparing power if I decide to go after that keep. And I will be playing presumably the Alta Mages and mass expose, which means I will have stripped bad guys, assuming they're not arcane immune, of defenses. Siege wouldn't care about fortifications, so I'll be removing their resistances. And everything I play would be siege. So there's a very good shot at that point. With all those cards in my hand, I will be able to take out the city and that dragon at one time. Now he's going to be tougher to kill because he's arcane immune, so I won't be able to remove that physical resistance. But he would still be susceptible to the fact that I would be attacking with siege. And I do have ice golems and a cold swordsmanship to throw at him, which would be turned into siege. So once I'm here, I can tell whether I will be able to know basically with some certainty. I won't know what my cards are until I decide to dive in, at which point I flop those cards, but because I'm definitely saving it for when I assault the city. I should have a pretty good idea once I'm here whether or not I'm attacking that city first, because that would be the other play, is hit this, hit the city, and then hit the spawning ground. The advantages of doing that, if I can, would be I could lump this guy in when I'm benefiting from the mages, so I don't have to reckon with those attacks there, and I will have a lot of resources left, still drawing the keep level card hand size. A lot of resources left to tackle that last spawning ground. So yeah, what we want to do is take that keep. So let's take a look. Let's jump back to our hand and see how we got on there, and then we'll find out what we're fighting. So what we're trying to accomplish here is we need to now move on to the keep in order to assault it. It's in a wasteland, which means we need 4 movement. We've already spent all of the points we generated here, so we need to find another 4. The options, of course, are playing cards sideways, especially with I don't give a damn, but the most that would give us would be 3. We could play Stout Resolve, and that would give us 3 plus maybe something if we discard another card. But that's pretty much it, movement-wise, unless we play Instinct. And just because that doesn't require any other cards to play, I think, even though I'm loath to give it up because it is an attack card, Intimidate is an attack card too. It's if anything, a stronger attack card. Stout Resolve could turn into a lot of attack. So I'm thinking I almost want to keep that for that massive assault potentially, because I'm going to have a giant hand, and that could turn a bunch of cards into a bunch of attack. I'll probably need something like 35 or 40 points of damage to take that city, even after I've stripped resistances. So that will go a long way towards turning a bunch of random cards into attack cards. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to play Instinct, and I've already used a die from the source, so I'm going to have to power this with a red crystal, but that's why you bank on a bunch of crystals in your inventory. And that's going to allow me to move on to the keep, and in assaulting that keep, 2 things happen. 1, of course, I hurt my reputation, and 2, I get to find out who my enemy is, finally. And it is nobody too scary. Okay. Couple of thugs. Okay, I got a few options for killing this guy. First of all, I could kill him outright with a catapult and a crystal. But that would use up a bunch of siege. And again, considering what might even be my next turn is going to be a city assault, potentially, where I'm going to be playing Ultim Mages, potentially, and therefore killing everything with siege. It is less important that I have the catapults, but what's even less important than that would be that I have cold toughness. Now, looking at this, you might think, oh, well, these 3 points of attack, I could send this, for instance, to my golems. After all, they're physically resistant. They could eat a 4-point physical attack and suffer no wounds whatsoever. However, once again, this guy happens to be brutal. So he's actually, I only need 3 points to block him, but he's actually doing 6 points of damage. So that would wound the golems, and that's not acceptable at this point. But cold toughness blocks him for free. Now I'll have to use 2 cards, but I'm going to be drawing, I still have a giant deck, and I'm going to be drawing a bunch of cards. Some of which I can turn into attack, so I'm thinking what I want to do is block him with cold toughness. And then I need to generate 5 points of damage. I can get 2 for free with cold swordsmanship. Chivalry is an option, but the nice thing about chivalry is the fame and rep bonus. If I'm trying to increase my score, and I know I'm going to be playing a bunch of attack in the assault against a bunch of enemies, if I'm able to group those 4 city defenders together, this could give me an additional 4 fame. So I'd like to hold on to that. I could play Mana Storm sideways for 3, but I might as well at this point, I think, play Intimidate, because I'd always do that later as well. And Mana Storm could turn into a crystal, which I might need. I'm probably going to chew up a lot of crystals next turn as well if I do hit that city. Gem Pouch might be a candidate for destruction. We'll have to see. But I'm thinking, yeah, I'm just going to play Intimidate for 3 points of attack to go with my cold swordsmanship, and that's enough to kill this guy. Now, Intimidate does hurt my reputation by 1. I already took the reputation hit, but this guy also gives me a +1 for killing him, so my reputation stays at that level right there as a result. So he's dead, and then I get 2 fame on top of everything else for killing him. So we're up to 107 at this point. Yeah. I think that's how I'm going to do that. I still have a bunch of cards in my hand, but again, I'm going to be drawing now to 11. And I am now master of this keep, so a couple of things happen here. I'm going to go ahead and mark it. I'm also going to make sure that my keeps are labeled. Go up here and drop this on the map to mark the keep as mine. And I actually do now know who the defenders of this keep are. So we'll go ahead and draw those guys. Autumn Mages. More Autumn Mages. Okay, these guys are following me around. I just recruited them and they're still fighting me. That's interesting. Oh my goodness. These are some nasty units. These are among your stronger enemies. And then heroes. Okay. Yeesh. And remember, all of those armors on there are improved. So that's 9, 9, 9, and 5 for their armors due to being in the White City. They're all fortified, but none of them are double fortified. So that's at least some good news. If I do that siege tactic, nothing's going to be a problem there, because single fortification is what siege is all about. The only real question remaining is whether I want to I think I want to play Mana Storm, or do I? I have green and blue in the source. I only have 1 green crystal. And I know pretty for sure I'm going to want to play Stout Resolve. And the reason I would do that is Mana Storm would allow me to reroll the source, but I would have to pay a crystal to do it. And the only benefit would be using what's in the source, but it's unreliable. At this point, I know I'm going to be able to have a black mana. This could give me a bunch of crystals with black mana. So, and there would be tokens if I destroy it, so I would have to use them. So if I destroy this, I'm not going to need much from the source, so I certainly wouldn't spend a crystal to re-roll the source at that point. What I might want to do is the following. because I want 2 black mana. If I play Mana Storm, I can take one of these dice and grab a crystal. Probably green at this point, just to even things out in the inventory. And I can re-roll that die, and that's another shot at maybe a black die in the source. If I can get black in the source, that'd be great. And then the another benefit of that is I'm drawing one more hand, and that's one more shot at a an attack card, or possibly a nice spell, possibly another maybe mana draw or something like that. Another shot at pulling mana draw, or the ruby ring or something for the assault, just to give me more black mana options. The only reason to really keep it right now would be that play to roll the source, which I don't think is a great one. Chance at a crystal later, or playing it sideways with I don't give a damn, but with my hand size is going to be 11, and then I'm going to add 2 and 2 next turn. So I'm going to have 15 cards in my hand. And if I play this, I'll have 4, so I'm adding 11 of my 15 here. No, I'm adding these 4, and then I'm adding 7 of my 15, so I'll still have 8 to draw after that. But I'm going to have a massive hand is my point. Virtually guaranteed I'll have another card that I can play sideways with I don't give a damn. So I think what I'll do is snag my crystal. And I think I'll do the green die with that, to grab a green crystal. And that gets rolled immediately, but it's kind of the end of my turn anyway, so I'll just roll that as part of my cleanup. And yeah, that's how I'm going to play that. So I'll throw those guys back up into the source, and I'll clean up here. And we are, yeah, we're drawing up to 11. And we did indeed get mana draw. So getting rid of Mana Storm got us Heroic Tale, which at this point pretty useless except for playing sideways, so that might be what I wind up doing with that. We didn't use any units. We got our skills back. I think we're in pretty good shape. We got a we don't have a ton of combat cards in our hand right now, but we do have your units, and we have Expose, and we have the Ultimate Mages. We have Chivalry and Stout Resolve, which is going to turn a lot of that into offense. And we do have Ice Bolt and Swiftness as options as well. So we'll have to see. Of course, we get 2 points free here. Never forget that. And Heroic Tales essentially attack 3 at this point with I don't give a damn. So we're in pretty good shape. Alright, that is our second turn of the third night. And now we just pop over to the dummy. The dummy is turning over a green, a red, and a blue, which means he needs to flop 2 more. And that leaves him with 8, and that does mean that even if they're both green, he's got 2 more card turns and declaration. So with him getting 3 and it coming back to me, that means I would have guaranteed 4 turns at this point. But I think what we're going to look at right now is whether or not I'm only going to take 2, because I want to explore whether or not it's possible to take out all of these guys and this dragon, such that I could then just bop over and take the spawning ground on my last turn and have that be it. Might be a tall order. These guys are pretty tough, but a lot of their toughness lies in the nastiness of their attacks, the difficult nature of blocking them, and of course these guys are brutal and poison. Paralyzing is never good. So you've got a lot of attacks you really, really want to block with these guys. But with siege and the ability to strip their resistances, yeah, we might be able to do some real damage here before that becomes an issue. So again, these guys are really tough, but that's because they do damage and because they have resistances, meaning that it's really hard to kill them first. But because of what we got in our hand, we do have a pretty good shot at killing them first. So I'm going to bring all of these guys down to the play area and take a look at them next to my cards. And while we're swinging down here, we'll see what we have in the source. A blue, a white, and a green. Okay. Oh. Okay. Alright. I'm going to unsnap these guys so they don't start bopping around on me of their own volition. Okay. Right, so as we were discussing before, I haven't committed to the assault yet, but I want to see if that's what I want to do or whether I would rather go into the spawning ground first. And as I discussed earlier, the virtue of doing this first is really twofold. One, this guy's not super dangerous at this stage of the game, but if I can use my Ultimages now, so much the better, is kind of the idea. If I'm blowing a huge powerful play here, now expose is not going to affect him, but if I'm blowing a lot of my resources on kind of universal maximization of everything I've got in terms of turning everything into siege and stripping all my enemies of defenses and everything, now would be the time to make that go as far as you can to be as efficient as possible. And then there's the added virtue that if I do take fewer turns, there are points to be had for ending earlier rather than later in terms of what the dummy has done by the time I finish. Not a big consideration, but it's a handful of points on the table. And bear in mind also I can call on motivation and unsparing power to add to this hand, which is already pretty big. So again, the Draconian might be doable now while we have the benefit of the mages. So if it's doable, why not? I have a lot of black mana options. I could get black mana from the Endless Gem Pouch and from Mana Overload. I also have mana draw, and I've got white that I could play to power that. So that's definitely a consideration. What if I played mana draw to generate 2 black? And in that case, I wouldn't actually even need necessarily to use Mana Overload for black per se. Because there is one other thing to consider is Mana Overload. The way co-op skills work is as follows for solo play. You can use them in solo play, but there's the way these work is you get an initial effect, and then the token goes to like the center area, and then there's an effect that's kind of lingering out there such that if on subsequent turns after you, other players in a co-op game, other players then meet certain conditions, then that activates something that's a benefit for them and sometimes to you, and that token then is returned to you once that's been activated, and of course it comes face down and you don't get it back until the next round. In solo play, the way it works is you can benefit from the secondary effect, but you have to use it on your next turn, not on the current turn, and you have to use it on your next turn or it is wasted. And the secondary effect on this is if you use the first player who uses mana of the color that you use to generate, that you use mana overload to generate. So for instance, if I flop this to get a black, then if on my next turn I play black in order to generate, to power a card or effect that generates attack or block, then that would get a +4. But I don't have a ton of spells that are generating attack or block via black mana, other than expose, which is what I'm going to be playing. In fact, I don't think I have any other spells that do that. So if I use this for black, I won't benefit from that secondary effect. Now that's not really a big deal, but it's something to consider. If I can use mana draw for 2 blacks, I'm just kind of thinking out loud here. If I can use mana draw for 2 blacks, then the Alta Mages could be powered, Expose could be powered, and then maybe I use this for a white or a red or something like that, knowing that going into the next turn, if I'm attacking the spawning grounds, then I could use that much more, that color of mana that is much more commonly used to power cards that do provide attack or block. In fact, now that I'm thinking about it, it kind of depends on what I get from motivation and sparing power. I don't know what that's going to give me. But I believe this is the first swiftness card I'm seeing, for instance. If this gives me a white, now I use it in this turn and it doesn't do anything other than just giving me a white token. So maybe I use that to power expose. Cool. My next turn, maybe I don't even use this swiftness now, or maybe I pull another one when I draw for next turn. But or if I get one from motivation or from sparing power, maybe I hang on to the second one. The point being that next turn, when I'm going into that spawning ground and I'm facing 2 brown enemies, most likely with not too many units, although after I use this guardian I'm going to reactivate him, so I'll have at least 1 guardian in tow. If I do that, then I just need to make sure I have a white crystal available to me or a white die in the source, and I would be able to power that swiftness and get range 7, which is going to be enough to kill most of your brown enemies. So when I go into that spawning ground, I can be virtually guaranteed of a free kill right off the bat if I manage to pull that off. So if I don't see swiftness in my hand, I know one's coming up next turn. If I get both swiftnesses in my hand, maybe I decide to keep one. Assuming I use this to power expose, or just generate a white mana for this turn. I know I'm going to need it for expose. I'll probably want to use it for chivalry. I'll want to use mana for mana draw in order to get those blacks. So I'm looking at probably, now hopefully I won't need whirlwind, but that means I'm going to want to save it. So I'm going to be needing a lot of white mana. So I'll probably be using a white die from the source and probably use this and then have at least used one of these crystals. So yeah, I'm thinking initially that mana overload would be generating white for me. But let's take a look now at how we would approach this. Suppose I do mana draw to get 2 blacks, probably turning the either the blue or green, I don't know that it matters too much, the blue or green die into a black, which has the virtue of not only generating 2 black tokens, but making sure that I have a black die in the source for next turn as well. Which if I'm keeping whirlwind might be a free kill. Right. So if I do that, if I play mana draw and I get those 2 black tokens, and assuming this, I've got a blue token to play with as well, then I would use 1 black token to power the mages special ability that turns all of my attacks into siege. Now, again, I have looked this up, and I cannot find any listing in the fact. I mean, the only description I'm seeing here is all your attacks become siege attacks in addition to any elements you have. They have. Now, you could read that as your attacks, meaning from your skills and your cards, but not from your units. But the only information I found scouring around has indicated that it does apply to your units. I don't think that what I've read is super official, but it seems to be, from what I've seen, a consensus. And I don't know if that's because of a clarification from an official source or not, but there's anybody who comments with a lot of authority that yes, it's absolutely for all units as well. So that's how I'm going to play it. If I'm wrong about that, then obviously this would have to be played differently, but this is how I'm going to do it. Then I would also be planning to play expose, mass expose, and the way that's going to work is enemies lose all fortifications this combat, or enemies lose all resistances this combat, and it gives me range attack 3 as a perk. Now obviously those two in conjunction mean that all enemies would lose all resistances. However, the summoner dragon would be immune to that effect, because that's what arcane immunity means. So even though the card says all enemies lose all resistances, it just means there's a resistance stripping effect targeted against all enemies. But of course some of them might be immune to it. And as a result, all those white and gray tokens are going to lose all of their resistances, which is freaking fantastic. But the dragon would not. It also means that I am not choosing to strip them of their fortifications. So all of those city units are fortified. The dragon, I believe, is not fortified, even though it's joining the fight. And I'm choosing to pull it into the fight, we're assuming for now. So it's not fortified. But it's not going to matter, because nobody's double fortified. And that's the only thing that's going to be at all relevant when all of my attacks are turned into siege. So all of my attacks are playable against any of these enemies. The only resistance among any of the foes that's left on the table is the summoner dragon's physical resistance. So what I would want to do is make sure that I have 8 points of elemental attack to kill him as efficiently as possible. And then the rest of my attack can just go towards the others as a group. And I have no reason not to just group them all together if I can kill them all in order to maximize the efficiency here. Because with no resistances, there's no resistances being shared among them or anything like that, so it doesn't matter that they're being grouped. There's really no reason not to. So what I'm going to do is attack the dragon. What I'm looking for here is ice, and then I'm looking at these guys as a group. Now remembering, this is 12, 20, 28 points of armor, but each one of these guys is boosted by 1. So they are actually at 32 total armor. So I would need 32 attack to kill that group. I also need 8 elemental attack to take out the dragon as well. So I'm looking at generating 40 attack total, which is pretty, that's a pretty big call. But even after using the mages, I've got ice golems can give me 6. Catapults, let's just, even assuming they're just giving me 3, because you know, throwing a crystal on them for an extra 2 is an option, but suppose they give me 3. That's 6, 9. These guys could give me 10 each, or 5 each, for a total of 10. So that's 19 just from my units. I'm halfway there. I've got 2 from cold swordsmanship. That's 21. Chivalry could give me 6, but I'm thinking I would want to play it for 4 to get reputation 1 and fame 1 for each enemy defeated, just to get as much fame out of this as I can. And of course I would use chivalry against the group, so that that would give me 4 fame, because it's for each enemy defeated by this attack. So that would be not during this combat, but by this attack. So it's only going to apply when you're grouping enemies, but of course I am. So that would be 25. Expose would be giving 3, that's 28. If I power this, 31. Rooktail sideways would be 34. And I could do these two sideways, or these two discarded with stop resolve for what did I say? That was 34, I think. So 36, 38. And if I have to play swiftness, that would be 41, or I could power the catapults to make it 41 right there. And that's not even factoring in these cards, which I'm going to pull just to see if I can do this using fewer crystals or picking and choosing which cards I want to keep. I've also got range attack 3 here. And the gem pouch if I absolutely need it. But with even just using these 4 other cards that are coming to me, just playing them sideways, that's another 4 points of attack. So I've got something like 45 or 48 points on the table, not even factoring in what's on the face of those other cards. And I don't think that that's using up a ton of mana that I don't have access to. So this looks like it's actually quite doable. Yeah. Okay. So there's like a million different ways that this could be played out, trying to massage crystals and everything. I could hum and haw at this for like an hour. But I think the larger point here is, even after I use motivation and sparing power, I'm probably not going to use all of my cards, and I'm still drawing 11. So even if I have like 3 cards left or 4 cards left, I'm not even using all of that. So I'm drawing a full hand of 11 cards before I go into the spawning ground. If I can save a swiftness card, which it looks like I'll be able to do, then I should have that mana overload white play. And I'll have a guardian left over to block the other unit that I'm not killing outright. So I should have plenty to get onto and take out that spawning ground after I do this. So really what I'm going to look at here is, what cards do I want to play to get the maximum score. What I'm going to look at is what cards do I get, and what cards might I want to hang on to. I know I want to hang on to Swiftness. I want to hang on to Ice Bolt if I can, because in the end game it might just give me a crystal, and the number of crystals in your inventory are points. Now it's a very minor consideration, but if you have, like, I'm looking at this, if I do this in 2 turns, I'm probably going to have cards left in my hand by the time I'm done with this. And if I can see to it that those last few cards are crystal generators, then that's a way to boost my score a tiny little bit for essentially for free. So I think that's what I'm going to do, is keep that in mind. Yeah. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pause this for a second. I'm going to pause the video, and I'm going to run through a couple of different ways of doing this. I'm not going to come back and show you what I guarantee is the optimal play here. But I'm going to think about this, and then I'm going to settle on something, jot down a couple of notes, and resume the video and show you what I plan to do, why I plan to do it, and then just go from there. So yeah, I'm going to pause this, and I'll be back in just 1 second. Hang on. All right. I have this somewhat worked out, and I'm pretty happy with the plan I've put together. I'm sure there is a more efficient way to do this, but there's like 6 trillion different ways to play this. And what I have going, I think, is going to leave me with a bunch of resources to go on and make sure that I have that spawning ground and allow me to save some crystal generating cards. And I don't know what else I could do to maximize the score beyond that. So even if there is a more efficient way that this could be played, which would be important in a different scenario, I think just because I have kind of a glut of resources and I'm looking at essentially 2 assaults here, and I got plenty for it, I don't think it matters all that much. So this is a way to do it, and a way to accomplish the relatively small list of things that I'm trying to accomplish here to give me the best shot at taking out that spawning ground, which I don't know what's in there right now, but I want to make sure that I get that, because that's going to be worth another 10-12 points right there, between the fame rewards and the crystals and the artifact that it's giving me, plus the 2 points for an adventure site and the final scoring. So I want to make darn sure that I have that that play there open to me. Probably even more important than saving some crystals, because they're only worth 1 point for every 2 crystals, and you can only have 12 in your inventory. So to a certain extent, saving crystals doesn't help me, because when I roll the site rewards and if I roll the gem pouch, I'm gaining random crystals that, if I have 3 reds or 3 greens and then I roll a red or a green, it winds up being wasted. So I think that what I'm looking at here is going to work is the upshot here. I'm going to stop blabbering, and I'm just going to show you what I've put together here. All right. So first of all, I have to move into the city, and once again, double time won't be enough, but I have stamina here to play that. So that's actually, sorry, before I do that, the very, very first thing I have to do is I have to grab my sparing power before I begin my turn, because that's the first thing I do at the beginning of the turn, is decide to add to it or pull it. So I'm going to pull it, having resigned myself now, and I get concentration, which is a useful card, and meditation, which I'm going to put over here as a save card, because I guess it could, for the cost of a green, if I have green mana left over, for the cost of a green, it'll allow me to throw a couple more cards into my final hand, which, that crystal might or might not lose me 1 point. But if it helps me guarantee those 12 or more from the site, it might be worth it. It's another option for sideways play with I don't give a damn, but I think Heroic Tale is going to fill that bill pretty nicely. So I don't, yeah, that wasn't a great card for me, is what I'm saying. It's not helping me too much. Sparing Power is done with, and I'm also going to flop Motivation, and as a result, I will draw 2 cards. Yeah, just draw the top 2 here, and I get a Stamina and a Rage. Okay, well, Rage obviously helps me in a fight. And Stamina will help me probably not until next round. So I'm probably going to, this one I'll probably use if I can at the end of the round. And I want to hang on to, I'm probably going to hang on to all of those. I don't plan on using the gem pouch if I don't have to. So it's really these cards down that are going to do it for me here. But that should be enough. I'm just moving around where I think they're probably going to go with one another. Okay. Yeah, so I'm going to play a card here. I think I'm going to play, do I want to play March or Stamina? I don't know if it really matters. But I have to pay movement to get into the city. And actually, before I forget, Motivation also gives me a blue token here. Of course, I'm not going to be able to keep that token. So I think I'm going to use it with the ice golems in a second anyway. I don't know that it really matters whether I use stamina or march at this point, so I'm just randomly grab one of them. We'll throw stamina down here, and that will give me the 2 movement that I need to enter this city. So bopping back up here onto the map, I am now moving on to the city, and as a result of making the assault, I do lose the 1 reputation. And I think what I want to do now is I'm going to play mana draw, and I'm going to use white for that. I think I will use the white die from the source. So I think I'm going to use a ton of white here, and that is going to allow me to take a die from the source and set it to any color except gold, and get 2 mana tokens of that color. You do not reroll that die when you return it to the source. So I'm going to do that with this. I guess I'm saving March, so maybe I'll save the green die, and therefore I will set that guy to black and grab my 2 black tokens. And so that's mana draw right there. Okay. And I think the first thing I want to do, of course, is power my Ultim Mages, turning everything into siege. And then I would like to... okay, there we go. And then I would like to get rid of that dragon and see if we can do this. Now I'm committed to the assault at this point because I have revealed cards. So there's no backing up from that. I've revealed cards after the assault, but I haven't yet committed until I make that assault, which I did after pulling the cards. When I'm committed to that assault is when I am deciding to pull the dragon. So I commit to the assault after exposing those cards, which means if I'm not able to pull this off, or it looks like it's too ugly, maybe I can still decide to throw him back. But I don't want to give up on those 9 fame if I don't have to. So I'm going to see if I can take him out, and of course I can, but what does it leave me with? Stupid. There we go. Okay, the ice golems with blue mana provide me with 6 siege ice attack. I will tag cold swordsmanship for another 2 points of siege ice attack. That is 8 points of siege ice attack. He's not fortified, he's not resistant, and therefore he is Deadsville. So he goes away. Now I only have to worry about these guys. At this point, I can play Expose. And I'm going to be grouping these foes together, although Expose doesn't require that. I'm already having that in mind. And I will power that with, I think I'm going to do this mana overload to grab a white. And I will just put a white on top of that as a reminder. That's not a token, it's a reminder that white is the color I played with that. And I will use my black token with Expose to turn it into Mass Expose. So all enemies lose all resistances this combat, and I get ranged attack 3, which is now siege attack 3. Elements would be preserved by this ability, but they don't matter because all resistance is being stripped makes that irrelevant. So once again, I'm looking at getting the 32 points of attack that I need, and I've already got 3 in the hand, and the rest of this is just find the other 29 points of attack. So how are we going to do this? I think what I'm going to do is certainly going to use these guards, because with only 1 turn left after I take the city, there's no reason not to, because I get them right back for free after this round. after this turn. I can activate the banner at the end of the turn and get these guys right back. So that's another 5 point. That's an 8 total. I'm going to play Rage with a red crystal. If nothing else, I know I have the ruby ring in my hand, so I'm going to be able to get that crystal back next turn if I get all my cards, which I think I will be able to do. So that's another 4. That brings our total to 12. I'm going to play Chivalry, and for fame purposes, the extra 4 fame matters more than a possible 1 point for losing a crystal. So I'm going to power Chivalry with a white crystal to get 4 more attack. So that brings our total to 16, and if we pull it off, we get 4 fame and 4 reputation as a reward, because there's 4 enemies being killed by this attack. Okay, we can turn that into 6 if we run short, but I don't think we're going to. Then what I think I'm going to do is play Concentration with a green crystal to power Stout Resolve, which basically makes this another 5. And that therefore is 21 total attack, and I can discard any cards I want for 2 attack each. Doesn't look like I'm going to need Tranquility, so I'll take those 2. That's 23. And I haven't drawn a second Swiftness, therefore I know there's a Swiftness in here, and I'm almost certain to be able to draw it. So I'm going to throw Swiftness in here, and I could turn it into 3 attack with a white, but I want to save that white for next turn if I need it to power Swiftness and get that mana overload bonus. So I'm going to just play it for 2 with Stout Resolve. That brings our total to 25. Okay, 3, 8, 12, 16, 21, 23, 25. I'm going to play Heroic Tail Sideways, as I mentioned previously, with I Don't Give a Damn for another 3, so that's 28. Now we come to the place where I might do it differently. It might not be the best thing, but given that Swiftness play that I have in mind, and given that I'm getting these guys back, I don't think I'm going to need a second heavy blocker. I'll also have the catapults to help me out if I don't use them. So I think what I'm going to use right now is these second Guardians for 5 points of attack. I was at 28 here, so that's 33. And that gives me enough. If I played the catapults, I could make it 31, but then I still have to get another point. I'd rather keep this card for moving on to the spawning grounds. I'd like to keep this just in case. I plan to play Meditation with this last crystal, and these could give me crystals in the end game. So I'd like to hang on to them. So I don't want to play any other cards. Now I could power this with maybe a blue crystal or something like that. That's an option. But all that does is give me 5 attack when I'm already getting 5 attack. So either way, I'm getting 5 attack and leaving 5 attack on the table. So I might as well leave the one on the table that might or might not need to use a crystal to do it. That's my thought. Plus, siege is more flexible next turn. This is already a siege. So that's the rationale there. Of course, this is no use to me as a blocker, but I don't anticipate needing that nearly as much next turn. So that was generating 33 attack on top of that initial 8 points of ice attack. So I killed the dragon first, played Expose, and boom, 33 points of attack versus their 9, 18, 27, 32 points of armor. No resistances in play, no fortifications causing double. So these guys are all murdered before they ever get to take a swing. And that, my friends, is one captured city. And I'm going to have, at the end of the day here, if I do play Meditation now, I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 4 cards in my hand. I'll be drawing up to Well, right now I have 5, and I'm drawing a hand of 11 because I am still next to the keep. And I'm also in the city, but those don't stack. So you pick the higher of the two, basically. I get 4 extra four added to my hand limit for the 4 keeps that I own, or I get 2 from the city. So obviously I'm going to take the 4. And therefore my 7 turns into a hand size of 11. So right now I'm drawing all those cards, and if I play meditation, I'm adding a couple of random cards from the discard. Now I have to play it now so that I get them next turn, which means none of these are going to be coming back to me. I'll get only what was in here. But there were a couple of cards in there. Even if I get stamina back, it helps me move onto the spawning ground. So I'm going to flip that over and give it a shuffle. But before we do that, let's figure out what we get for killing all these guys. The city's ours, so we can go ahead and mark that. There were 4 defenders in that city. I killed 5 enemies, but 1 was not a city defender. So I only mark it with the 4 shield tokens for the 4 defenders. And actually, what I've been dropping them on the city just because it's cooler, but at the table, you would be dropping them on the card, which just makes the map a little bit cleaner because things can get a little cluttered. So you would be marking them on the card there. And you actually, because you can have multiple players in the cities at one time, what you do is actually, when somebody moves onto the city, you have these big minis on your map, and you can't have, there's not enough room on that space for 2 or 3 minis. So if you're playing in a game with multiple people and you both happen to be in that city, what you're doing is you're actually putting your tokens, your minis on the card as well to indicate that you're in that city. And then when you move out, you just plop them back onto the map. But the city is now marked, and she is ours. As a result of this, we already lost the reputation, but we are gaining 4 reputation because we use chivalry to kill 4 enemies, and we actually get 2 for killing a rampaging enemy. So it really doesn't matter because I'm not going to do any influence stuff in this city, but we actually gained 6 points of reputation there. So the people really like us at the end of the day here. We are also gaining, let's take stock here, we get +4 fame for killing these guys. So 4, 9, 17, 26, and 34, plus another 9 is 43. I'm counting 43 fame here for these 5 enemies. Double checking my math. Yeah, I think that's 43. So what that means is we are going to, first of all, throw these guys over here onto the pile of failed losers. And we were at 107, so plus 43 takes us to 150. 150 is not a terrible score for after the final scoring. And we're going to be adding, wow, this is, we're going to do pretty well here because we're going to be adding a good, 80 to 100 points in the final scoring here. So this here's looking pretty nice, I gotta say. Okay, so we are at 150 fame, and the turn is not over yet, which is why I'm not quite clearing this out. I could play the gem pouch. I don't anticipate destroying it later on, but at the same time, it's not preventing me from drawing other cards, so I might as well just wait to play it to, maybe if I play it now, what if I roll 2 blues? That's wasted. So maybe I wait and play it when I have more information about what's going down next turn. Yeah. When I go into that spawning ground, I am gaining 3 random crystals as well. But I might as well roll. After that combat is when I'm going to be at my lowest ebb, crystal-wise. So that's probably when I would play this to minimize the chances of wasting some of those freebies. And again, it's not preventing me from drawing, so there's no reason not to hang on to it. But I do want to play meditation and give myself a bigger hand next time. I think, especially with, I'm going to have 5 freebies. And I want to say I have Crushing Bolt coming to me too, which is a green crystal. So I've got some crystals coming my way in the end game. But as I said, just maximizing my chance of making sure that I take out that spawning ground, I think is worth a crystal at this point. So I will take randomly. I already shuffled this. I'll give it another shuffle. Take 2 cards off the top here. And yeah, that is it. I will, with my last action here, I will reactivate my guardians. And then it is time to clean up. Alright. Got a lot of crystals to chuck. We went through a bunch. 3 of them were just tokens though, so I didn't use, oh my god, I did that again. And I'm really, this didn't go too well. Alright, okay. Yeah, I had crystals flying everywhere and cards are flying over. Okay, I'm going to pause the video, get this cleared up, and catch my breath, and I'll be right back. Okay, I think we got this all squared away. We're down to not too many crystals, but I'm not too worried about it. We've got 2 units left, and we are going to be drawing now. Our hand, as we discussed, is actually 11, and then meditation increased that to 13, and I've already got those 2 cards that we added to the top of the deck. So I think we're going to wind up drawing everything, and we'll see what we get. Yeah, we do have Crushing Bolt. We do have that stamina, as I was discussing. Got a couple of spells. They might be wasted unless I play them sideways. I don't anticipate... yeah, with what I have here, I might be able to do this without using too many crystals, so that when I get them back, I'll be in pretty good shape. But that's the hand. We'll see what we got in the source. We do have a black die for those spells, and we got our white back to make sure, although we had one in the source. So we definitely have that stamina play going on. Our last turn is going to be to bop over here. And we are in really good shape. Again, we're at 150 fame. That turned out really well. We've got 1 turn left to get this fame up even higher. And we're at 150 right now. And in a lot of my games, I wind up around 190 or so after the final scoring. Sometimes the cards have been pretty kind to me in this game, I have to say. The unit draws have dovetailed, the enemy draws have dovetailed nicely, and of course, drawing those Ultim Mages made this last round kind of easy mode here. But bear in mind that I positioned myself pretty well to get them when they showed up. Yeah, the final scoring usually is in the neighborhood of 100 points or more, especially if you're not taking any wounds in a solo game if you win. So we're probably pretty safely in the I don't want to oversell it, but we're probably going to be in the 240, 250 range, maybe higher, which would be my best score ever. I don't know, being on camera agrees with me or something. But yeah, this is going really, really well. I just have to make sure I don't blow this final assault on the spawning ground. But I think that would be pretty hard to do at this point. There's 2 brown enemies, but they're not fortified, and I got a lot of resources at my disposal here. And yeah, that last site is going to give us whatever the enemies give us fame-wise. +2 in the endgame scoring for another adventure site. It'll give you an artifact, that's another 2. And then the crystal rolls as well are going to essentially turn into points from the final scoring as well, because you get 1 point for every 2 crystals in your inventory. So I would say at least 12 fame out of this. I'm going to get 1 for the ruby ring when I play it, so I'm going to essentially be very confident that I'll have 163 at least by the time we're done with the game, and then we have the final scoring on top of that. So we're doing pretty well. All right, let's bop down and check out the dummy. So, of course, what you would be doing next in normal situation would be grabbing the dummy and flopping again. I don't know what he would get, but just for giggles, he would pull a green, and then a white, and then a blue, so there'll be another 2. So not the best, but not the worst. He'd be left with 3 cards at the end of the game. However, as I understand it, things are a little bit strange here. At least in the description of the solo game, it seems to me that you get to take an extra turn once you conquer the final city in solo conquest or in any conquest. It's basically game over. You've won the game. But it gives everybody at the table a shot at taking one last turn in order to kind of massage their scores as well as they can to have that last chance, so that nobody's left surprised by the fact that the game just ended and they weren't able to at least take a stab at that big thing that they were gunning for or something like that. I guess that's the rationale. For whatever reason, that is the rule. Now, in the solo description, it actually states, as I read it, that you do get that extra turn after you conquer the final city, and that you do not flop the dummy player. Let's just take a look real quick here at the way this is worded, but that is definitely how I'm reading it. Okay, so here's the solo conquest description from the rulebook, and I probably should have shown this at the outset when describing the setup, but you have the 7 countryside tiles, 2 city, 2 non-city, core. The cities are level 5 and level 8, the first being 5, the second one revealed is 8. You have the dummy player. You get rid of the competitive spells from the spell deck, and it says the interactive skills, which in the base game are just their competitive skills. The advent of Lost Legion is where the cooperative skills come in, which are described in the rulebook there as usable for solo. And then when you take, here's the rules on the tactics, how that works, which is how we've been playing it. When all cities are conquered, scenario ends, and you have one last turn. The dummy player does not, specifically says. Now, because the dummy player isn't ever doing anything other than flopping cards and declaring end of round, I don't know what this would be doing other than stipulating that the dummy player does not flop cards. I don't know what this language, why they would add this parenthetical if that was not the intent. If all they wanted to say was just you get one last turn, and all they meant to say was that you get one last turn even if the dummy player has already declared end of round, or even if the turn in which you conquered the city was the one that took place after end of round had been declared, or something like that. It just broadly says you definitely have one last turn. As I read this, it does seem to indicate that even if the dummy player does declare end of round, if you do conquer that city afterwards, the language here seems to me to suggest that you still get one last turn. But either way, in the scenario in which we are in, it definitely seems to suggest to me that the dummy player does not flop any cards and you still take one last turn. So for this reason, I am not going to be flopping any cards for the dummy player. While we're here, so I don't have to come back to this at a later date when we do the final scoring, the way I'm reading this, because it specifically outlines that you get the achievement for scoring but not titles, and we'll talk about that. But then it goes on to talk about the other side of the scoring card, that you get all the stuff at the bottom, and yet it does not mention any of the stuff at the top. Now, it doesn't say that you don't get those things. It does just say refer to the other side, but then it lists everything at the bottom and not at the top. So I don't think in a solo game you get the points at the top of the card, which would be, in this case, 7 points for every city of which you are the leader. Because in solo, if you've conquered the cities, you're already going to be the leader. As a result, that's 14 points in the final scoring that I will not be claiming. As far as the titles go as well, that's another, 20 or 30 points there that I will not be claiming. So we're looking at, 40-ish points that I am not going to be taking in the final scoring. But even with that, I think we're still going to be adding a good 100 points or so to our final score and winding up with something pretty disgusting. So with that, let's get back and take a look at our final turn. All right, so the first thing we need to do is move on to the spawning ground and execute our attack on it. We've already got our hand drawn and all of that taken care of. So really it's just a question of, as you saw, it's in a wasteland, so I need the 4 movement to get on there. Once again, double time is not going to help me tonight, but that's okay, because I believe these 2, stamina and mana storm, must have been the ones that I pulled as a result of meditation, so that's not really helping me a ton. But it does let me get onto the final tile here pretty easily, because I don't anticipate needing them for combat. And as a result, we'll go in there and with our action, we will execute an attack on that adventure site, which is, well, you know what, I'll pull back over here. Spawning ground. You pull 2 brown enemies and your reward is 3 randomly rolled crystals. The way that's rolled is just like when I've been playing the gem pouch. You roll, if it's basic color, you get a crystal. If it's gold, you get to choose the color of the crystal. If you roll black, you get 1 fame. Exactly the same as the gem pouch. So if I don't use the gem pouch during the fight, I think what I'll do is just roll all five of those at the end to make it nice and convenient. You also get an artifact, which is picked the same way, but given that this is the last turn, and when you get an artifact, it goes to the top of your deed deck, it actually won't matter really in any way whatsoever what I pick. It's just going to be 2 points in the final score. Yeah, so what we need to do is figure out what we're fighting. I'll grab 2 tokens from the top of that pile there, and we will bring them down here and see what we got. You've got a Hydra and I think that's a Manticore. I think I called it a Chimera earlier. It's a Manticore. Okay. Manticores are nasty-ish in that they don't have the biggest attack in the world, but it's swift, so it's hard to block. If you let it through, it poisons, and it's assassin, which means you can't send it to units. So even though this was poison, if this attack had been not assassin, even if it was swift and poison, it's only 4 points of damage. So I could have taken this and sent it to my ice golems and not had to worry about it. But it is assassin, so if I do let it through, that's a wound in my hand and a wound in my discard pile. That's -4 fame in the final score. So I don't want to let that happen if I can avoid it. The Hydra is one of these units with 3 attacks, so I have to block each separately. You can't group attacks, unfortunately. Now I can send one of those to the golems, and I could block one with rage pretty easily. I'm assuming I'm probably going to use my guardians to block the Manticore, Yeah, so basically I have this guy. His big virtue is block. Block 8 counts twice against swiftness. So he's actually block 16 against this guy. He only needs 8. So I'll play the Guardians to block him. But before I even do that, I deal with the ranged attack phase. And that's when I'm going to make my swiftness play. Knowing that I'm going to be blocking the Manticore, I would obviously use swiftness, which would be, thanks to mana overload, that would be ranged attack 7. And he's resistant only to ice. So that kills the Hydra before I have to deal with those attacks. So while I could block one and send the other one away, I'd have to maybe play a card sideways or something to take him out, which I could do. But at that point, it might be a little bit costly to generate enough attack. Remember that if I can, I'd like to save all these cards that are potentially going to give me crystals. Yeah, I might have wanted to use Mana Storm before using white, but since I don't have any green up here, I might as well use that on a green die. That's going to give me green. But yeah. Right, so now I just need to come up with 6 points of attack. And if I play the ruby ring, I'm going to get a red crystal and a red token. So I know I'm going to play that for the fame, if nothing else. So I might as well use the token to grab 4 points of attack. And then I could just use my catapults for the other 3. That's 7 attack against the Manticore. So he was blocked, then he's killed. He was killed in the ranged, and we're done. And I was able to hang on. A couple of powerful spells. And the rest is all potentially mana generating. But that was actually really easy. Okay. Wow, that's 10 points of fame there for those guys. And 1 point for the ruby ring. So that's another 11 points of fame. That takes us to 161. There's no effect on the reputation, but we do grab the artifact. And again, it really doesn't matter what I pick. I guess I'll take the bling, because why not? I'm selfish and I'm victorious, so I am basically adorning myself with jewels at this point. Okay, so now it's really just a question of what sort of crystals can I generate. And the only option for Mana Storm is going to be green, so I might as well just take that green now, because it's really not going to have any effect whatsoever on anything. So I'll take that green crystal there. And then this one is going to be blue. This one... actually, hang on here. Since I'm not pulling any dice from the source, I'm going to hang on to this red here. It might not make a difference, but if that was 2 and that was 3, that's 5 points of attack to kill that Manticore. I could just as easily grab this card, and even without I don't give a damn, I could play that sideways. I could also tag Cold Swordsmanship. I got plenty to kill that guy without using that token, which I could then use with Crystallize to get it into a red crystal. The reason being, I have no other sources of merely tokens. Everything else that gives me anything is giving me a crystal. So if I'm going to use anything to use this for, it would be to turn that red token into a red crystal. So I guess I technically play that with a red token and then get a red crystal. It's a little retcon there on the combat, but I don't think it matters for anything. I'll tag that just in case, and that just to really demonstrate that I had plenty. Yeah, so these guys, it's pretty much set in stone what they're going to give me. So there's no reason not to do this now as well. That'll give me a blue crystal, and that'll give me another green. So I am at 3 each of the red and blue. And, well, hang on to this. Let's hang on to that. I'm really nitpicking this, but I'm going to hang on to crystallize too, because if I roll like a red and then like 2 blues or something like that, I'm going to get that crystal that I was going to get out of that anyway. Remember, I'm with the gem pouch that I'm about to play. I'm going to roll 5 random with the 3 from the adventure site. I was playing this other stuff because it doesn't matter. There's no choice, but this one, it does matter. So I'm going to hold off because I have to play the adventure site reward really right after I take I do that combat. So these guys I just played now just to make it straightforward because they're going to give me what they give me either way. But this one, I might have a decision to make. So now I'm gonna go ahead and grab my dice and roll my 5 random crystals, 3 from the adventure site and 2 from the gem pouch, and they all work the same way. So I'll just roll them all together. All right. So we have our 5 dice to randomly roll and see what we get. Okay, we've got, so the black is going to give me 1 point of fame. So that takes us to 162. And then when I swing back down here, I've got, I'll just grab these others. I'm going to get a red, a green, a white, and a gold. The gold being one I can choose randomly. So this, I think, is going to work out. I might potentially be maximizing this. No, I might be a white short of having maximized everything. So okay, so I got a green. That's that guy. I get a red. There's that guy. Oh, actually, I think I did. And I got a white from that guy, and then I get to pick with the gold, and I've got 3 of everything, so I'll accept white, so I'll grab a white. Wow, that worked out pretty well. So I maximize all that. So the only way that could have been better is if I had rolled more blacks for free frame, because you're 1-to-1 rolling black fame-wise, and if you're maximizing crystals, it's still 1 fame for every 2 crystals. But regardless, I can play crystallize with my red token to get a red crystal, which turns back into a token that I don't use. That's pretty much where I'm left off, and that right there is game. All right, so we wound up, that was pretty cool. We wound up not only with 162 fame at the end of the game, which is pretty delicious, but we, well, let me also mark the adventure site here so we don't forget that. And that is where we're at. I'm going to take this onto day just so we can see the map a little bit better here. And that is the game. We have finished. I don't know if I mentioned it, but when I was here, if I had flopped another bit of well, what were the tiles that I might have picked for cities? Right. So if that one hadn't been here, we would have been looking at killing a draconum and then going onto a hill and assaulting a city and then burning a monastery, probably. Pretty comparable, pretty similar, and the movement, the terrain would have been pretty comparable. Might have been able to buy a spell or something like that, and of course we would have a different cadre of enemies there. Had we had the green city, we would have had just a couple of rampagers, which are not worth very much. And then our only reward would have been units. Recruitable units, potentially. But being as that we were pretty maxed out on units, and even getting up to that magical glade would have been ugly. it probably would have devolved into kill that guy, hit the city, and pull that guy in for a lot less fame, and then nothing to do on the final round. Yeah, so this would have been fairly similar to the way I probably would have gotten a little bit more out of the white overall than I would have from this, and green would have definitely been less, but none of them would have been like, you know, I was thinking that I could have gotten the magical glade to use it, but with that lake in the way, that's actually a point worth making before we end here. Get these out of the way. Had I had this here, and I was here, if I really wanted to get to that glade, I would have had an option, because there is a rule, I believe, that if you use up the stack, like our stack that is generated for the purpose of this scenario, if you use it up, you can still go into the box and draw like random countryside tiles. So I could have drawn a random tile here, which in this case wouldn't have helped me. But there would have been other countryside tiles, of course, that would have allowed me to even grab a ruin on the way to that magical glade or something like that. So that might have been another play if I had taken the, and there's a keep here. So that's probably what I would have done. If I had flopped this, I might have seen what this was for 2 movement and then said, ooh, a keep and a ruin possibly before going there, because those would have been more worthwhile than rampagers over here anyway. So I could have made hay potentially, although if I had drawn this, I would have been pretty boned, unfortunately. But as it turned out, it's my best score ever. We'll see what the final is, but 162 before the end round scoring. This went amazingly well. And it's certainly not all because I was just playing really well. I know for a fact I made a couple of mistakes along the way, things that I could have done, pretty minor. But the train just fell there was a nice, easy, consistent swath of points that I was able to collect, and then the cities were nice and right next to each other. The cards cooperated. I took some skills that I don't always take, like I don't give a damn. I have a new love for I don't give a damn. I don't think I appreciated just how really, really powerful that skill is. And then, of course, I got some really nice gold units in tow, including these Ultim Mages, which made the last round real nice. So I wound the game up using most of my cards. Even managed to fill up my inventory at the end of the day. I have no wounds in my deck. I have no wounded units. They're all gold, so there's going to be a ton of points there. I am at, I want to say, 30 or more cards in my deck. I got 18 here. I got one more here, so that's 19. Yeah, I got 31 cards in my deck, and those are all 15 of those 31, because you start with 16, so 15 of those 31 are going to count towards the final score as well. Actually 32, I wasn't counting chill. So 16 of 32 are adding to my final total. So I am going to have a ridiculous score at the end of the day. But that was the last round. I don't want this to drag on for too long. I'm just kind of I'm reveling a little bit here in this victory. This went really well. This was my best game ever, I have to say. Every time I play, it doesn't go this well. But obviously, I have a really nice pile of defeated foes here. We never got hung up. I think we took one wound the whole game, something like that. That's just indicative of how everything kind of came together. And again, I don't score this well every time. I usually break 100 by the end of the game, but or come close to it at least. But 160, no, not. That's after final scoring sometimes, getting into that territory. So this is definitely not indicative of my usual go round, which means, because I don't think I was playing especially differently than I usually do, what that means is I must have had some good luck along the way. I had one bad turn with regards to the dummy player pulling green every time, but it happened to happen during that Red City assault, I think, when I was able to pull off what I needed in a few rounds anyway, because I was having a big blitz of cards when I assaulted the city. So even that didn't wind up hurting me very much. And I seem to recall getting influence when I wanted influence. I had to wait around for Call to Glory early on, but the last round I got it right away, so I was able to get 2 units. Although I think I wound up using the catapults only in the spawning ground scenario, so getting the catapults wasn't especially beneficial, as it turned out. I might as well have just kept the heroes, but I didn't know that going in. Yeah, no, just I got pretty lucky, I have to say. The cards fell nicely. I always had good options for what to do. There were a couple of times when I waited around. This turn, I had expose in my initial hand. I knew I wasn't going to use it until the final assault, so I hung on to it. But that wasn't too crippling or anything, because I didn't have a ton that I needed to do before executing that assault. So, I mean, that's not like a really in-depth strategy that nobody else would have ever thought of or anything like that. So I have to say, I did have really good fortune. I think I played pretty well. I don't think I violated any rules. I don't think. I might have done a couple of things out of order, but I don't think it affected the outcome anywhere. I don't think I missed scoring anywhere. I even wound up with a +5 reputation bonus. Kind of the icing on the cake. So yeah, this wound up being a really pretty crushing victory, but I don't think it was, I can't claim all the credit there. I had some good fortune. I was able to make good use of it. And I think I'm going to call that the end of this video. I will pretty shortly here put together a quick video where we tabulate the final score and see how we did. But for now, thanks for watching. I hope you found this whole experience. If you watched this whole thing, God bless you. I had a lot of fun making it. I hope a couple of people have some fun watching it, and maybe picked up some strategic pointers here or there. But I definitely did get lucky. I can't expect to repeat this every time I play. But again, I think I played it fairly well, and I hope it was helpful, or at least entertaining for you. So thanks a bunch. I bid you farewell until the scoring video, and until then, I wish you the best of hunting, Mage Knights. Go get 'em.